Before there were stars, there was silence. Not the silence of something waiting, the silence of something that had not yet been asked. The silence of a space that was complete in itself and contained no awareness that it was incomplete. Until, in a moment that cannot be assigned a location or a duration, it was no longer silent. The first stars sang when they were born. There was a being there to hear it. His name, if it is a name, if the sound that other things call him maps onto the concept of name, in any meaningful way, is Bard. He was there when the universe produced its first note. He has been listening ever since. And the story of why a cosmic being who exists to hear a symphony decided to descend into a world small enough to walk through is the story of what happens when the most beautiful thing you have ever heard starts producing the wrong sounds. New here? Subscribe. Every week, a League of Legends story told the way it deserves to be heard. To understand Bard, you have to understand what he is not. He is not a protector in any sense that would be recognizable to the beings who use that word. He is not a guardian assigned to a territory or a principle. He is not in the way that most cosmic forces express themselves, organized around opposition. He does not fight darkness because darkness is the opposite of what he is. He does not have an enemy. He has an ear. The celestial realm, the vast luminous space that exists above and around the material world, where the oldest forces move and the youngest stars are still completing their formation, is, to most of its inhabitants, a place of light. Of visual grandeur, the kind of beauty that exists to be seen. To Bard it is a symphony. Every star has a sound, not a physical vibration, something deeper than that, the specific resonance of a thing that exists at a particular scale in a particular moment with a particular history. He moves between them not as a traveler moves through space, but as a musician moves through a composition, following the line, hearing what comes next, understanding what preceded it, appreciating the relationship between the note that is happening now and all the notes that have come before. He listened for what might have been eons before anything on the surface of any world was complex enough to produce sound worth adding to the composition. The universe sang to itself. He heard it. He was, if such a thing can be said of a being without a body or a face, content. Then the wrong note arrived. It was not, at first, obviously wrong. It was small. A quality of interference barely distinguishable from the natural complexity of a composition that had been accumulating for longer than most things in it could comprehend. Bard's attention passed over it once, twice. The third time, the meeps, the small, luminous creatures that accompanied him through the celestial space, the fragments of cosmic attention that had gathered around him over the centuries, directed his focus to something specific. Here, a passage that was building towards something other than resolution. There, a syncopation that was not the productive kind, not the tension before harmony, but the beginning of something that had decided it did not need harmony. And here, where there had been sound, silence. Not the silence of the beginning, full of potential, the silence of something that had been stopped. Bard descended through the registers of the celestial realm, following the interference back toward its source. What he found was a world, small, material, alive, in the specific way that material worlds are alive, burning and building and tearing itself apart and reassembling in the patterns that life follows because life has no other patterns available to it. And the world was singing, not the sophisticated sound of the celestial bodies whose compositions drew on eons of existence. Something more immediate, more raw. The storms and the wind chimes and the thunder before the lightning sound that came from the world's own nature rather than from deliberate creation. A contrapuntal voice, untrained, completely without awareness of the larger composition it was disrupting. He listened to it for a long time. He could have simply appreciated it, filed it as an interesting texture, a small planet's contribution to a universe-sized composition, noted and moved past. But the sound was not static, it was growing. And the direction it was growing in was not toward integration with the larger composition, but away from it, a divergence that had been subtle in the beginning and was becoming less subtle with each interval. Something would have to be done. He came down. The transition from celestial to material was not simple for something organized as Bard was. Organized. A being built for a mode of existence that did not map neatly onto the physics of a world with gravity and matter and time that moved in one direction. His meeps solved part of the problem by taking physical form, and he solved the rest of it by borrowing materials from the world he was entering, cloth from a wandering minstrel's cart, small objects that happened to be nearby, a mask with 3 holes in it, because the face beneath required representation, and this was sufficient. He looked like a traveler, an unusual one, the kind that made people stop and stare and then laugh and then feel, afterward, a warmth they could not entirely account for. He moved through the world for what amounted to an age of it. He played, he wandered. He encountered people in the specific way that a being operating on a different scale encounters smaller things, with the complete attention that makes the smaller thing feel more significant than it ordinarily considers itself, and with the mischief that comes from a vast intelligence encountering something that cannot understand what it is encountering. He confused people, he delighted them. He left in his wake the specific impression of something that had been genuinely, incomprehensibly present for a moment and was now elsewhere. He was also, throughout all of this, working. Here is what Bard understood about the problem that he had come to address. It was not a problem with the world. The world was doing what worlds do, living, producing sound, following the patterns that had been established when it was formed. The problem was with objects. Specifically with objects that had been displaced from the places in the composition they were supposed to occupy. Powerful artifacts. Weapons of extraordinary capability. Relics whose specific resonance in the symphony of things was disrupting the passages around them, not because they were evil, not because they were misused, but because they were in the wrong location. The way a note can be correct in one context and catastrophic in another. The way a sound that belongs in one part of a composition produces dissonance when it appears in a different part. He began to collect them, not to destroy them. Destroying a note does not improve a composition, it simply removes material. He collected them to relocate them to the places in the material world and the celestial realm where what they were would contribute to rather than disrupt the ongoing arrangement. He carried them through portals that he opened in the air, in the ground, in the specific folds of space that the celestial realm provided access to for things that knew how to find them. This was not simple work. The artifacts were not cooperative in the way that objects are sometimes not cooperative, not from will, but from the accumulated gravity of their histories. The way things that have been in one place for a long time develop a relationship with that place that resists relocation. He moved them anyway. He moved through the world, leaving behind the specific absence of things that had been there and were now elsewhere, and the specific presence of things that were now where they were needed. He was tuning the world, one displacement at a time. The interference, as he investigated it, turned out to have dimensions he had not initially accounted for. It was not simply a world producing sounds that did not fit the composition. Something was adding to the dissonance deliberately, some force operating at the level of the celestial realm itself, using objects in the material world as instruments for purposes that Bard could perceive the effects of but could not fully identify the source of. Not nature, not accident, intention. What the intention was, he could not determine with certainty. He could only observe its outcomes, the wrong objects in the wrong places, the composition bending towards something that did not resolve, the silence appearing where there should have been sound. He continued his work, he is still continuing it. The meeps move through the world ahead of him and behind him, collecting and pointing and helping with the transitions that a being of his scale cannot always accomplish with the precision that the work requires. He opens the portals. He relocates what needs relocating. He moves through towns and through forests and through places where the light hits the ground at particular angles, and everywhere he goes, the people who encounter him are left with the specific feeling of having been briefly in the presence of something that understood the world in a way they did not, and found it, on the whole, more musical than alarming. He knows that a larger conflict is coming. He is not deaf to the future, not fully. He can hear the approach of something that will require more than tuning, that will demand the kind of response that cannot be accomplished by relocating objects. The composition is building toward a passage he has not heard before, with a quality that suggests its resolution will depend on choices that are not his to make, but that he will be present for. He will have to choose a side. He has not yet determined which one. He is listening. When the time comes, the sound will tell him. If this story reached you, subscribe. Every week, the full lore of a League of Legends champion, told the way it deserves to be heard.